everyone, I'm Janvi and I'm very excited to introduce you to Alejandra Castillo. She is my classmate. In fact, she's my in America we call it cohort mate because we take different classes, but we are in the same cohort. She is one of the most wonderful people I know in Iowa City. Very, very helpful. And I'm so happy that she's also agreed to help for today's video. She has done her BS in biopsychology and counseling psychology. That's a lot. At Morningside College in 2019. And then she did her MS in psychological sciences in 2021. Her research interests are in examining social disability and autism from a relational perspective. And currently, she's in a doctoral program with me for counseling psychology. Her research here examines twice exceptional students addressing interventions and barriers. And her clinical interest also focuses on assessment in children and Spanish speaking populations. So I think today I'm going to speak a little bit about master's level psychology programs, but I will definitely invite her back to talk more about PhD because she has been doing assessment in her PhD from the time she's here, and I have been doing therapy. So I think both of us are on, and here in America, like in India, everybody does everything. Here you actually can choose what you want to do. It's like if you're child focused or adult focused, if you want to do assessment or therapy. So I think we have lots of interesting things to talk about. But for now, I think I'll only start with MS or master's in psychology. So thanks for being here, Alejandra.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Thanks for inviting me. I'm so excited to chat about it, answer any questions.
Thank
Yeah.
you. My first question is, I know that there are too many options in America. What are some of the options that you're aware of that people can do a master's in the field of psychology?
Yeah, so I think that's a really great question in the sense that you can do a master's in psychology that doesn't get you licensure, and then you can choose to do a master's in psychology that does get you licensure. And I think that when we talk about those have differing topics. For example, like maybe cognitive psychology is an example of something that wouldn't give you licensure. But overall, if we're talking about both of those in general, those could be like clinical psychology, industrial organization psychology, child and adolescent development, the counseling psychology, general psychology, which is what I did, educational psychology, experimental psychology. There's general developmental psychology, so just focusing on the development, social psych, health psych, behavioral psych. I think those are mainly the big ones. There's also, I think, more recently, there's been like forensic psychology. That's kind of been coming up recently. But yeah, I would say those are like the general broader topics of psychology that there's a lot of master programs in.
Thank you. Do you know if they also have something like neuropsychology for a
Yeah, I
master's?
didn't mention that. Yep. Yeah, so there's a lot of there's biopsychology is one of the ones that are kind of recent too, and those have a focus of neuro. And within biopsychology, you tend to either get a specialization in neuropsychology or forensic psychology within the overwhelming or overarching biopsychology kind of topic.
Thank you. And to clarify, once you do a master's, you still can't call yourself a psychologist, right, in the US?
Right.
Okay, you need to do a PhD.
Generally, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. What is the benefit of doing a psychology which can be licensed and not licensed?
So I think the benefit of doing essentially, a master's that is licensed, which is accreditation. So if you do a master's level program that is accredited, it's generally and should be accredited by what's called CACREP, and that's CACREP. If you were to do one of those programs that were accredited by CACREP that does give you licensure, then you would be able to like practice and see clients and work directly with clients at the master's level. But for my program, for example, I did a master, and those programs that are CACREP are generally masters in arts. versus those that are not, they're more scientific based. So they're masters in science, which is what I did. And the benefit in those is that those provide a lot of research, a lot of rich experiences, a lot of lab work. And so those are the benefits of those, but then you do not or are not able to see clients directly as a counselor or therapist.
Oh, okay. That's helpful. So, yeah, that but then in that case, I would just assume that the master's degree would only be like the licensing degree would only be related to counseling, but it seems like you can also be doing other things with the other options. Do you know any of some of those options of apart
Yeah,
from counseling, what can you do with a license?
with the license. So
Mm.
a large part of that is so in the US, generally master's level students aren't really allowed or don't have the training to do testing and assessment. So they generally do not do that at the master's level, which is what psychologists do once you get or obtain a doctorate. Um, Many people, I would say, at the master's level tend to work directly with like kids, or in like hospital as technicians, um, or with like couples, marriage, family therapy, that kind of thing. Um, Master's levels also don't really do supervision. So it's really confined to only doing or seeing clients in a counseling therapy setting, or being a technician at hospitals and working directly, developing maybe programs or treatments, like interventions for their clients or for that population, as well as um, maybe doing case management. So doing a lot of case management, possibly like a social worker. So those that are getting, a degree in master's in arts that's accredited in psychology, they can also do a lot of more case management stuff like a social worker.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's very interesting. So, I mean, even you were a first generation student. After finishing your bachelor's, what would you recommend students to, how should they find which is actually a good fit for them?
Yeah, so I think that's hard because if you're still trying to navigate, maybe something that you want to do or what you want to do in the long term, like, do I want to eventually go get my doctorates? Or do I want to just kind of do 2 more years of education and be done? Um, I think that can be difficult, but if you're wanting to, see clients right away, I would definitely go towards the master's in arts and getting licensure. But if you are more maybe on the research side and you want to get more research experience and you want to work in labs or organizations as maybe a lab tech, or doing a lot of research interventions for organizations, or doing like direct research for yourself, and for the population that you're serving, then definitely go to the master's that isn't going to provide you accreditation. But if you also just want more research experience and you don't really care about um, getting licensed right away because you're going to go to a doctorate after, then also go with the master's. But I don't think either or would hurt unless you don't want to continue education.
That's really helpful. Thank you. And so, but in case if someone wants to do a research and only a master's, can they still work after a master's?
Yeah, so I have a lot of colleagues that kind of primarily they just wanted to do the research aspect. They didn't really want to directly work with clients in a counseling setting or an assessment setting or anything like that. Um, or do the like traditional talk therapy. They kind of just wanted to do the research and write articles, publish op-eds, be a part of organizations. I have a friend that works for the suicide prevention company, and they do a lot of the statistics on the research. I have a friend who works for a university as a primary lab technician, doing a lot of the data collecting and a lot of the analyzing, and primarily working on article writing. So I think that, there's a lot of opportunities out there, and especially in psychology, we definitely want to, gain all the research that we can to help support the populations that we're wanting to serve.
That's also extremely helpful. Thank you. And so I'm just wondering, this is also a question that a lot of people have been asking. Is there a significant amount of difference in the money that people make if you had a master's degree versus a doctoral degree?
Yes. Yeah. So I would say yes. So if you're doing a master's at any level, so a master's that's, licensed, and a master that's focusing on research, and you compare it towards a doctorate degree, that is a substantially different amount that you're going to be receiving at a doctorate's level, because you're able to do one, you get a lot more education. So you have 5, 6 more years on top of your education. So the more education generally you receive is the more money you get. And that's how it's looked at in the US, which kind of sucks. But also you get all that training, and you're able to serve a wider amount of people. So a lot more people, as well as like being able to do a lot more different things. So there's a lot more advantages to that as well.
Thanks. Yeah, like you mentioned, that assessment can, at least in the US, can only be done by a doctoral level psychologist.
Generally, yeah.
Yeah, because that's very different from India. In India, anybody can do an assessment. I mean, or at least masters, because doctoral level degree is not extremely common. Another thing, I mean, and this is just like any suggestions that you might have on even choosing a subfield of psychology. Like if someone's confused between social psychology and counseling psychology, if you were confused like that, or if you know someone is, since you also teach a class for intro to psychology, what guidance or what suggestions do you have for those students who don't know what subfield they should choose, and they're now at bachelor's, they need to make a decision for masters?
Yeah, I think that is a really good question, because I'm teaching an undergrad class right now, and I've taught that class for 3 semesters now, and I have a lot of students that constantly ask that question. Well, like, how do I know I'm good at this, or how do I know that's what I want? Or the question is, I like both of these. How do I decide which one I want to do if I equally love and enjoy what both would do? Um, I think that's something that you kind of have to balance yourself. One, take more classes in both of those and decide like, oh, I really enjoy the pieces that this one brings, say counseling psychology over social psychology. Two, immerse yourself in the research as much as possible, and kind of understand what you're more interested in, or what you see yourself doing in the long run within that research. Even though you might not do research, you're still using that research to guide your work. And then three, primarily working with the specific populations that you would work with. I think that when we directly work with the populations that we intend to see ourselves with, we can directly see, okay, I really, really enjoy this, or these are pieces that I wouldn't want to do in my everyday life. That's generally the advice that I give to undergrads, as well as like, kind of go with what you're happy with. And if you would be happy with both, then, there's no harm in choosing one over the other.
Yeah, that's very helpful. And also for, I mean, for some of the students who also are, say, in rural towns or in places where research is not very commonly available, I think, to Alejandra's point, just trying to look more into what's available, even Googling or reading research papers, because Google Scholar has lots of options. So reading those kinds of research papers, and also it's okay. I used to be someone who did not understand a lot of research, but it's just okay to try to still read and try to make sense of what's happening. And that would give you an idea that there is one subject that I specifically absolutely love to read more on, and one is not so much. So maybe you can just make a choice based on that.
Yeah, I think sometimes making a choice can be difficult. And also, what helps is if you were to apply to masters in various programs. So like, for example, I applied to clinical psychology, counseling psych, a general psychology, and cognitive psychology in my master's. And doing interviews or looking at the research or talking with the advisors and professors within the program, I was like, this is great. Okay, but this specific program is better or aligns more with what I felt, or I really enjoyed that program and how I interviewed there. And, working with that advisor seems way more aligned with my interests than the other ones that I interviewed with. So that kind of makes the choice easier, as well as like making connections within those interviews that you have or within the interests of that advisor. So that kind of makes things a little bit easier.
Thank you. And you just said something which was also very, very interesting and something that I did not know. I'm curious if students are actually even allowed to reach out to advisors for a master's program beforehand. Do you encourage them to do that? Do you have any tips or suggestions on that?
Yeah, I think that people, well, I know this. I like, if you are wanting to reach out to an advisor, you are probably more than welcome to reach out to them. If they don't answer you, then that kind of shows you like, hey, they're either too busy or they're not interested, or they don't have time to take on another student. That you can also, reach out to those professors, those advisors that you're interested in, as well as reaching out to the graduate students in those programs as well. And they can kind of give you an idea of like, hey, this is maybe why our professor isn't answering, or something like that, right? But I highly encourage to reach out. Definitely do not reach out with, hey, here's my CV, here's all my information, or anything like that, like you're kind of already trying to apply. But just reach out with general curiosity, reach out with an interest, and maybe even provoke like a question. But just acknowledge that those professors are busy. They are, have a lot on their plate. And so they don't maybe always have enough time to read a whole paragraph of an email every day.
Yeah, thank you. So keeping it short could also be important. And how do you actually know about, I mean, where do you find the grad students? If how do you find them out and reach
Yeah,
out to
so
them?
generally, if you want to know more about a program, you generally reach out to the admission person or the contacts for admissions. So each program, at least within the US, generally has an admissions contact person. And they have that generally on their page saying, like, if you're wanting to apply or if you have interest in this program, contact here. Or if you have questions, for example, like fee waivers or questions about total tuition costs, things like that, they'll have an email there, and you can reach out to the admissions and be like, hey, or like very formal, but like, hi, is it possible if you can connect me with a graduate student that would be willing to chat with me about their program and their advisor about such and such program?
This is so helpful because that was also something that is not a norm in India, and like in students might not be aware that there's something like this that they can do. Um, so thank you. And now just coming to a little more questions about what do you think? Do you think a bachelor's in psychology is required for some or most of these programs to be able to apply for a master's, or can you just be in a totally unrelated field and get it?
So a bachelor's in psychology is definitely not required within many programs. There are programs that do strictly require, like, we need you to graduate with a bachelor's in such and such field before you apply to this program. But really what's required in most, if not all, master's programs is that you take the core courses of psychology. So general psychology, developmental psychology, like group psychology, counseling, or anything that's, within your undergrad or your bachelor's degree that you can get experience in psychology courses. Because they want to identify, do you have interest in psychology? And if so, show the interest by taking these courses. Um, so they don't want to, maybe accept a student that may have no underlying information about psychology, and they don't want to just kind of put these graduate courses on you without you not knowing some of the core theories or core grounding work that psychology does.
That's helpful. But then at the same time, I'm also thinking that there are some students in India who realize that they want to do psychology, but they've already picked a different stream. So here, like I know that in America, you just come in and you can pick courses. In India, it's like you take admission into a major. So you take admission in BA, and in that you still might have some chance. But like if you want to pick psychology, you have to take it in the first year itself. Well, if you've not taken it from the beginning, you don't have a generally don't. You might get one elective course maybe in some universities, but at the same time, if you enter an engineering college, so that college is dedicated to only engineering, so there is almost no way that they can do a psychology course. And in that situation, if they don't have a course at all, do you think that they could still try and apply for a master's?
I think it would be really difficult. I think trying never hurts. But what might make it stronger, or maybe a way for them to understand where you're coming from, is if you were able to frame your applications in a way that you saw your current degree within psychology, or how it related, or how specific classes related. Um, or if you were to take, if you did your master's in engineering, you graduated, and then you went to go work in a psychology related profession, or temporary job, and then applied and been like, hey, I really enjoyed this job. Like, this is why I want to continue my work in psychology. Um, I think finding some ways to show them that this is why you're interested and this is how you've like gained that interest is really important before applying.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Yeah, because I mean, I'm just thinking, and again, like in the US, I'm saying this with caution because it doesn't mean that you're just not absolutely not allowed to apply. You can still apply. You just will have to find a better story, not just for the applications, but also for the visa process. Is be like, because the person will be like, you have an engineering degree, why are you doing a master's in psychology? So I think knowing that, yeah, this, and for a lot of students, I know that the story that at least they've shared with me is parents were never allowing me. So I had to do a bachelor's in engineering. And now I want to do what I want to do. I want to do what I enjoy. And in any other case, man, you can just be like, I was exposed to psychology in these ways. And culturally, because psychology is more difficult. I mean, just being able to explain something of that might be helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you. I have a question about now admission structure and fees. So is it easy to get admission in master's level programs?
I think that depends, right? It depends where you're applying. Like in in the US, there are prestige in some areas or some schools. There's also um, master's level programs are generally bigger, right? So they generally accept more people, but still there's limited spots. Um, you have a higher chance, but it can still be difficult. Yeah.
That's helpful. Yeah, thank you. And I believe that some universities don't offer a master's and they directly offer a PhD. And I had a very hard time understanding that. Now I do understand that a little bit, but do you have any, like, yeah, do you have any understanding of what that means when people say we are not giving terminal masters? Yeah.
Yeah, so some programs don't directly have the staff to do a master's, or don't have the capacity or funding to do a master's, and all they have is the training and funding to do or give doctoral degrees. Um yeah, I think that not every university has master levels. Not every university has doctorates. So that kind of just every university or college is different. Um, so I would just be careful, or when you are looking into the programs, like ask those questions. Can I apply to a doctorate, get in and stop at my master's and, get that degree? Or do you have just a master's and just a doctorate, or can my master's transfer into my doctorates? Like, can I just get granted into the doctorates if I start my master's here? Those kind of questions.
Thank you. Are there any fee structures that you're possibly aware of for international students?
Yeah, so again, every program is different. There are fees in every application primarily that you do, but there are also fee waivers. And that's kind of what I was talking about earlier, where I had mentioned is if you contact an admissions person and you want to know about how you can be financially funded or gain a waiver, which kind of waives your fees for applying. Then that's something that you would ask, and many times they would put on their website, if they're good about this, is email admissions if you're interested in a fee waiver. Or another way, or another, the one of the states, and some states do this, but I know specifically about this state because I applied there, is Texas. Primarily, what Texas is very complicated, but that state, they have individual state fees that you have to pay, and then they also have program fees. So they have two application fees that you generally have to pay for, and that's true for both internationals and resident students. So they have a two-part fee process, state fees and like university program fees.
And so this is for this is tuition, or this is just application fees that are
These
state
are
and
just applications.
okay. Okay. Got it. Thank you. So maybe people can just try to reach out and see if there is any
Yeah.
possibility for a waiver. Mhm.
Right. I think a good thing about many programs is they do have admissions tied to every single program. And so those admissions can answer your questions, or they can forward you to someone that would be able to answer your questions. And that's what they're there for, is they're there to help you with the process and there to answer the questions that you might have that you're unfamiliar with.
Yeah. Thank you. So I just have mainly two more questions and then anything that you have. One question is, why did you choose general psychology, or like even psychology in general?
With my master's,
Yeah, I mean, what made you interested in psychology as a subject, and also why did you choose to do general psychology?
yeah. So in our multicultural course, we just were asked to write a life story. So this is kind of fresh. Um, about how we got to the route that we're in. I think a big part of my reason for choosing psychology was language and how to understand language in relationships and connecting when language differs. So kind of trying to, one, break that barrier in helping not just like language differing in like Spanish to English or English to French or anything like that, but just like how you communicate with people, like people who are nonverbal, people who are verbal, like how those connections form and how we can make these connections develop without having um, an impact on language or with needing or learning that language. So a big part of my reason for doing psychology is like trying to be that voice for the Spanish speaking population and kind of gain the interest in working with Spanish speaking individuals within psychology, primarily within like testing and assessment, because we know many of those are normed in English. So trying to like develop a measure to norm them in Spanish, or things like that. Another big reason was my interest in love for autism. As a young girl, I always had, I was always that little girl that was always like helping the kids that were in special education and trying to navigate and how to teach them ways and how to like best learn or use their strengths within the classroom. And so that kind of gained my interest in autism and gained my interest in like the connection and communicating that social challenge that autistic people have, which is a lot of what my research was in my master's, and similar to what my research will be now in my doctorates.
You just reminded me of something. My professor in undergrad, who I really look up to, used to always say that don't wait till you become a psychologist to be kind and helpful and empathetic. And I've always seen that quality in Alejandra. I've been an international student here in America, and it's hard. And she's someone who doesn't need to be told that this something is challenging. Like, she is so vigilant. She just knows there's something's wrong, and she's very helpful in those things. And I think one example of that would be when I had to do IQ assessments with kids, and she just was like, "Hey, by the way, do you know kids? Can I just drive you somewhere?" I didn't have a car. So I really love that quality about Alejandra, and that's why that was one of the main reasons I wanted to also bring you on channel, because I know that a lot of students also want to look for role models. And to me, I personally believe that having those qualities, genuine kindness, to me makes a huge difference. And people can feel that when you work with them, even if you're doing assessments like Alejandra is. So I really appreciate that in you.
Thank you.
This also reminds me of one more question, which I think you're excellent person to ask. A lot of students write about how they struggle at home with parents do not who don't allow them to do psychology or don't allow them to pursue PhD, think that you should be getting married, or you should not waste your time studying and things like that. A lot of those cultural barriers. Um, do you have any suggestions or any message for those students on how to navigate a situation like that, especially when your parents are very strict?
That's a really good question. I mean, so starting college, one, I didn't realize I didn't ever acknowledge that I was going to college until I did. It was kind of a last minute thing. I went, whatever. I didn't know what I was gonna do. So my parents, being from a Mexican household, my parents really had that stigma about psychology and not really knowing much about it. So that's definitely not a route that I started with. And I did start with like biology as a basic framework and being like, oh, I'm gonna go be a doctor in some specialty. And that's something that they really supported and they really um like understood, primarily because, right, being a doctor is very high level, very like appreciative, very well known within all cultures. And um that's something that they understood within themselves, and that they could tell others, like, oh, my daughter's gonna go be a doctor. But that's not something I aligned with. And then later I was in I took my psychology courses. I was like, you know what, like, I even though this isn't what my parents want, like, this is something that I want, and I want to be able to find joy in what I do. And if I'm a doctor and I'm not finding joy in that, then that's not going to serve the people that I want to serve. Right? What benefit is it if I don't enjoy what I do? Um then those patients or whoever I see in those populations, they're not going to benefit from me. So there's really no point. So I really had that like a hard conversation within myself. And then I seeked so many different like advisors or friends within the community, elders, older people, to guide me in how to have this conversation with my parents, because it's something that they didn't understand. Um, and even up until like I graduated, that was still something they didn't understand, is like psychology, choosing the field and then choosing to continue education and not getting a job. That's not something, again, they understood. So it's knowing that you're going to have to navigate that life, if those are the cultural barriers that you face, like knowing that you may have to navigate that with your parents constantly, but also trying to understand, like, they might not fully understand what you truly want to do and how this is going to benefit you. So just kind of showing that empathy and showing like the constant education and teaching to your parents and being like, this is what I love to do, and I'm going to continue doing it because I'm helping others in the profession. Um, Kind of navigating it that way, but also like, I know that's not the same for everyone. My parents have been very supportive in the things that I do, but like, I do have to constantly have those conversations with them. So knowing that I probably will have to constantly talk about that, in my lives and in theirs. But I know that's not the same for everyone.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that because it's hard to realize that. Um and again, it's not everybody has the same privilege that they're just born in such a rich household, and their parents are like, do whatever you want. At the end, that way you can come back to our store and just relax. Not everybody has that privilege, and so for some people it's really hard to have that conversation, and I have lots of people asking me that question on my channel. So I really appreciate also the perspective that you bring to class, because to be able, it's a struggle, but I also think of how that makes your motivational factor so strong when you want to, because you know it, that you want to do it even if it's painful, you know it.
When I think it, like the fact too, like we love what we're doing, like you and I, and we know why we love what we're doing, and we want to help a specific population, or we want to help, the population in general, and this is how we're going to do it. And because of that, because of the passion that we have for this field, like we do it even better and greater than, maybe not having that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I remember someone had commented, is it okay if I don't have the same passion as you and still do psychology? And the answer is, yeah, you can. It's just it makes your life easier, right? In a doctoral program, it comes with a lot of sacrifices, and
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So you still stay dedicated to something that's so challenging for the love of it, and I really appreciate that you want to bring that to the community. And someone like you would be such a valuable resource and a valuable person in this community to help that out, because there are fewer people like you out there. So yes, I think I mean that was most of the questions that I had about. I'm going to ask more questions about like these for international students who might have those logistical questions. I will just ask some admin person or like someone else who's gone through the process of what's CPT and what's OPT after studying. So I think I'm not going to get into that. But
Yeah,
apart
because
from that,
that is.
yeah, exactly. So that'll be something that a conversation with an international student, and I'm also going to be making more videos. And but if you still have questions that you want to ask Alejandra, please post them in the comments below. And if I see a number of people asking the same question, I will try to invite her again. And I'm hoping that she says yes to
I
come.
will probably say yes, but
Yeah, no, thank you. Any last messages or comments that you want to say to students, especially who could be first generation students who are yeah, who don't have the same privilege as many other people and wanting to be in this field? Yeah.
yeah, I think that I have like someone in my mind that I'm thinking of when you say this, but I think a big part of it is, finding role models in the field and connecting with them, or finding, people that you generally see and love what they do, and having that connection or building that communication with them is important. It's never bad to continually ask questions. That's the way you learn, and that's the way that you gain knowledge and curiosity in the field. So definitely ask the questions that you want to ask, and don't be afraid to ask them, especially for first generation students or students that are struggling to get into the field that they want to be in, because maybe they don't see the same people that you are, or the same identities that you hold within the field. So one, find those role models, and two, like definitely ask the questions that you want to ask, because someone will want to answer, and someone does want you in the field to help others.
That is so nice. Thank you. Thank you so much for highlighting so many points that were totally unknown to me as well as a student, of reaching out to admissions coordinators, reaching out to grad students, asking questions, finding a role model, and also having a conversation with your parents and yourself sometimes if you're not sure of what you want to do.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me, John V. I really appreciate it, and I'm always welcome to any more questions too. So
Thank you so much. Thank you.